Today on Law Next, Ryan Anderson, the co-founder and CEO of Filevine, which just announced that it's raised $108 million in a Series D funding round to drive expansion of its all-in-one legal software suite. This is Bob Ambrogi, and you are listening to Law Next, the podcast that features the innovators and entrepreneurs who are driving what's next in law. Before we get to today's interview, let's hear about the sponsors who make this podcast possible. Workers' compensation lawyers need tools that support them in the background, from the courtroom to the office and everything in between. Case helps lawyers simplify their billing, streamline their documents, and automate their time tracking wherever they go. Case does the work for you so you can focus on what's really important in your day. Visit meriscase.com. That's MERUSCASE.com today. Now on to my interview with Ryan Anderson of Filevine. Ryan Anderson, welcome to Law Next.
Bob, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and excited to tell you about all the news that we just announced. But wherever the topics go, I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, well, I'm especially appreciative of the fact we are recording this on the day the news broke. I'm sure the deal happened some time ago, but I'm sure you've had a particularly busy day. So I appreciate your taking the time out of a busy day to talk to me. I think about you often because one of the last human beings I saw before the pandemic set in was you. I was in Provo for some meetings at BYU Law School, and you were kind enough to have me over to your offices in Provo to chat a little bit. And I remember it was a pretty hectic day. I think everybody was already trying to figure out whether to wear masks or whatever. It was March 12th, I think it was, of 2020. Right before everything happened. So,
well, I think you tweeted an image of you on the plane that was empty. I think you were one of the last brave souls to fly. And I remember the day very well. I remember you coming to the office. We're no longer in those offices, but I remember it very well.
Yeah. So you moved to Salt Lake City?
Or? We did. I grew up here and, had family in Salt Lake City. It's not all that far from Provo, as you know, but yeah, we like it up here. And we're in a place called Sugar House, which is kind of on the way to the ski slopes, which can be nice. When we have customers who want to come and get training here, they can kind of make a day of it.
Yeah. Well, since that day that I saw you in 2020, a lot's happened, starting with what's happened today. But before we get into all of that, just for anybody listening who may not be all that familiar with Filevine, what's the elevator pitch? What do you do?
So the easy, quick elevator pitch is we're Salesforce for lawyers. I think a competitor would be somebody like a Clio. There's a company called Needles that's a typical competitor. There's a group out in New York, Litify, that's a competitor. But I think the right way to think about us, and I think this is a fair statement if you were to take a look at our interface, we don't look like those systems. I mean, I don't think it's a departure from sort of what an average person might think about our software to say, hey, there's a different look and feel to Filevine. And that's really more of kind of a project-based approach to case management. So we're going to look a lot more like Asana than we are, a traditional case management system.
Yeah. And I hear you referring to yourselves as a case management system, and that's how I've always referred to you. But you really evolved well beyond a simple case management system, or certainly what you were even just a few years ago, right?
That's absolutely right. So there are three major components we believe to the workflow of a lawyer. Really, there's probably four, but the fourth is really challenging and probably something we won't take on. But we believe that most lawyers have to do a few things. We believe it starts with case management. So we think that the communication about a matter, the decisions that go into why a contract is the way it is, or why a settlement came out the way it did, or why a motion looks the way it does to a court, those tend to be thoughts and strategies that get discussed amongst lawyers, between clients and lawyers, and then they're encapsulated in a document that really kind of serves as the artifact of those conversations. And so we think your case management system, because it's your chief database, your chief kind of working database as a lawyer, is the best place to have those conversations. So Filevine's really built around these conversations that we have around the data of a case. And then we believe, of course, that almost always winds up in what I like to refer to as the the product of a lawyer, which tends to be, although isn't always, a document. It's almost always the case that the work of a lawyer is going to kind of be encapsulated in some document somewhere. A motion, a brief, a contract, a sale document, you name it, right? It's almost always in that form when it's done. And of course, lawyers need to manage those documents. So, more and more, we are the document management system of choice for the law firms that use Filevine. So they're using us for both those things. And then time and billing. The lawyers bill for the work that they do, of course. And we have engaged in a multi-year effort that we're still engaged in to become a time and billing system that can be relied on from firms large and small. And, more and more of our customers are in that area. So we started off in the personal injury area, which we can speak to, of course. I was a personal injury lawyer. But more and more of our customer base looks and feels sort of like the general legal community. Anywhere from in-house lawyers to lawyers that practice family law, corporate law, real estate law, personal injury law, criminal, whatever it may be.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the reason I think about your company, as more of a case management platform, or why I've traditionally thought about it that way, because I know your background. You were a practicing lawyer. Tell us about that. How did you come from being a practicing lawyer to becoming a legal tech entrepreneur and CEO?
It definitely is not an easy thing to do, and it's not a one-step process. I don't think anybody, if they're being honest with themselves, says, today I'm going to stop being a lawyer and I'm going to start being a legal tech entrepreneur, and the lines are not blurred at all, and I can go from one to the other immediately. I came up with the idea at my law firm. I had a lot of tasks that needed to get done. I always think about, what does a lawyer have to do in a particular day? And there were the things I had to do, but there were also the things that I had asked somebody else to do. And those were really the things that kept me up at night. Did Phil do the thing I asked him to do? Did Stacy do the thing I asked him to do? And now I got to follow up with Phil and Stacy. And am I going to remember to follow up? And am I going to remember to follow up in time? And those were the kinds of questions that would cause me, again, sleepless nights and have me kind of scrambling to make notes wherever I could to not forget those kinds of things. And so eventually I started using kind of what I thought was a fairly sophisticated system of flagging in Google Gmail. And then I had a big Google spreadsheet, and eventually met up with a developer friend of mine who knew another developer, and the second developer said to me, hey, look, I think I can help you. And so we kind of sat down to solve this problem. Initially...
that was Jim Blake, is that right?
That's it. That's him. That's exactly right. And just an incredible human being. And I would say still to this day, one of my very best friends. But yeah, he deserves a lot of credit for this. I've got a lot of sort of ambition and drive, but Jim was the technician behind it for sure.
Yeah. I mean, you've just closed on this Series D round. You've raised over $200 million in total.
Not quite that.
That's not right?
155. Yeah.
All right. Crunchbase has got you wrong.
Yeah, I wouldn't let in equity raise. It's about 155.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. So not counting.
Our press release had to clear finance, so I'm pretty confident in that number.
Okay. All right. Was it in your press release? I didn't see that in your press release. Either way, both big numbers. Nothing to sneeze at. When you started this, did you see it becoming as big as it has become, or were you seeing yourself as developing a kind of a niche, platform for PI lawyers or something?
I envisioned it becoming bigger than it's become, if I'm totally honest. I know that sounds a little crazy, but I initially didn't think what we were doing was even necessarily kind of applicable to lawyers alone. The system that we built, I thought had broad applicability to anybody who needed to manage a process that had a lot of disparate tasks and multiple people involved. In particular, like high stakes work was really where we felt like this was necessary. So if you're a coffee shop and you're selling coffee, we're not going to help you. But boy, when what you're working on is really important and failure is really, really bad and success is really, really good, whether it's a multi-million-dollar deal you're negotiating, whether it's a very important litigation you're going through, in those types of issues, there tends to be a lot of people working on them and a high degree of coordination. And I'll tell you, the thing I think we got right is really tried to nail that down. There was a lot of practice management systems that I think really focus on relationships where there's maybe a lawyer, maybe a paralegal, maybe there's a second lawyer working on a case, but it's not really meant for an entire team to be working on a case. And maybe even teams across firms working on a case. And that was where we felt our niche was. And I always felt like that problem was legal related, but not legal specific.
Do you still feel that? I mean, do you still feel that this product has potential in other maybe professional services verticals or outside the legal world?
So I can tell you our very largest customer is an accounting firm.
Is that right?
Yeah, in fact, they're almost twice as big as our next biggest customer. So yes, I do feel that way. The problems of communication and alignment when an organization gets to scale are really challenging. It's very hard to keep everybody on the same page, especially when they're all driving towards the same kind of goal. And there's a lot of tools that developers have built. You think of something like Atlassian or Trello, or Asana is a good example on the marketing side, that have really speak to this, but there's really very few people who've tried to tackle it for professional work. I think Asana has made some inroads in the legal tech community, but I haven't seen it become really standard. And I think there's some reasons for that we can get into, but the base level one is that I think lawyers aren't really going to use a secondary system. I think you have to get the basics right. You have to get the time and billing right, the documents right, the case management right. And then if you can layer project management on top of it, then I think they'll use it. And so that's sort of where we're coming from. But yeah, Filevine's built in a really modular way. And again, credit to Jim Blake on that. And I should also credit Wes Cooper, who was the first developer he hired, who's still with us and a very important part of our team. But they had this initial insight that very little of what we build should be hard-coded to legal. And so if you were to have an instance of Filevine, Bob, it would look very different from a law firm down the road who also had an instance of Filevine. It's quite configurable.
You started this 2014, I think, 2015, 2000.
Yeah, and those dates are always hard to know exactly, kind of like...
Right, I know.
But the launch date publicly has always been March 15th. We launched at the American Association for Justice Conference in Palm Springs. I remember it well. But we were working on the software certainly a full year and a half, 2 years before that.
Yeah. So getting from there to here, obviously you've had a couple of milestones, but when did you start to feel like you were really getting somewhere, like you were starting to build traction with this?
Yeah. So probably about a year in, probably about a year post-launch. So we built the software, really just, I was using it and some friends were using it. And then we decided to max out my credit card and get a booth in Palm Springs for this conference, which we did. I remember driving down there in my truck with the booth packed into the back seat. And
did you buy a computer monitor at the local Mac store and then return it after the conference?
Yeah, that's totally how it was. And by the way, I'll never forget somebody coming up to me at that conference. This is 2015, not that long ago, and a very serious partner at a law firm, a woman came up to me and she said, this is illegal what you're doing. You can't make cloud-based software. I said, I really hope that's not the case. We've looked into this. And she said, no, I'm quite certain this is illegal and you're going to have some problems. And so, I mean, just 7 years ago, this was still kind of, somewhat controversial. But anyway, yeah. So from March of 2015, we didn't do much revenue for those 7 months, but I think we got to about $100,000 in recurring revenue. So maybe sold, if it's 10,000 a firm, maybe sold about 10 law firms on average. But the next year was really quite good, and the revenue really started to go up fast from there.
Yeah. When I was there back in 2020, it was, I forget whether it was while we were meeting that day or soon after, you announced your first acquisition of Lead Docket, and then since then you've made another acquisition. I think you've had a total of 2 acquisitions, right? Lead Docket and Outlaw.
Yeah.
So why did you want to go in that direction? Why did you want to acquire those companies? What did they bring to Filevine that wasn't there before?
Yeah. So, boy, the reasons between the two are quite different, and they serve different communities, as you might imagine. Lead Docket is really built well, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say I think it's the best for plaintiff-side firms. I think it's the best lead management system in the country. I don't think you can buy a better one. And we were having so many of our customers reach out to us and asking us to integrate, and we didn't. And eventually, those customers stopped asking, and at some point, I think I said, hey, are we not hearing anything else from Lead Docket? And somebody on my team said, oh, no, they built the integration. And so no one was asking anymore. And I asked how many customers we had, and I think somebody said something like 75. And I thought, oh, my goodness, they're clearly onto something. And I reached out to Eric and talked to him, and the founder of Lead Docket. And he was amenable to making the change. I think, running the business side of it was less interesting to him. And I'll tell you, we, frankly, if I'm being perfectly honest, we needed that part of the system. We were really good once a case was accepted, but we weren't that great at the CRM kind of workflows that happened before that. and Lead Docket was excellent at it. So it's been a great fit for us.
Right, and which is very important for PI lawyers.
Very, very.
And then Outlaw?
Yeah, so Outlaw is a very different kind of situation. So there were two kind of main components. Filevine has, for the past couple years, really made inroads into the office of the general counsel. So we have Fortune 500 companies who use Outlaw. Carta is a customer of Outlaw. We have a lot of really high-profile corporations that use, sorry, I said Outlaw, but what I actually meant was Filevine. They're customers of Filevine. They're using it in their corporate and in-house counsel offices. And those GCs were asking us about CLM. And so our minds started thinking about that. And, at the same time, we were just frustrated with how hard it was to generate complex documents in Word. So that was sort of bothersome to us. To get really kind of complex documents that have a lot of if-then statements on them and can, toggle back and forth between a whole host of variables. It's a challenging thing to do. And so we were working through that challenge and came across this company. And I was demoed the software just about a year ago. It was in February. And I was blown away. Evan and Dan, the two founders there, had built a product, had basically said, hey, we're going to handle CLM, but the main intuition we have is that we're going to assume that lawyers might actually make a switch and not generate all their documents in Word, which is a big assumption, huge assumption. And so I believe they may be the only CLM on the market that really doesn't rely on Word. Now, it integrates with Word, but it doesn't rely on Word. And that makes document generation and clause libraries and, highly variable documents much, much easier to program. And so they built a beautiful system, and that product has just taken off like a rocket since we closed that deal. And we're super excited about it. It is almost already rivaling Filevine in terms of lead flow.
I'm speaking with Ryan Anderson, the co-founder and CEO of legal tech company Filevine, in an interview recorded last week on the day his company announced a $108 million Series D funding round. We'll continue our conversation in just a moment, but first, let's hear about the sponsors whose generosity supports this podcast. Being chained to the office is a thing of the past. Busy lawyers trust Case to manage their practice wherever they go. Case helps lawyers simplify their billing, streamline their documents, and automate their time tracking. Case does the work for you so you can focus on what's really important in your day. To learn more, visit meruscase.com. That's meruscase.com. Welcome back to Law Next. Last week, the Utah-based legal tech company Filevine announced a Series D funding round of $108 million. My guest, Ryan Anderson, was a practicing lawyer when he and two others co-founded the company in 2014. In the years since, the company has seen enormous growth, especially over the last couple of years. Let's get back to that conversation. How did it happen that Filevine expanded outside the sort of the litigation world into corporate legal? I think you're doing some government. You have a lot of government business these days, and some of the other areas that you're in. I mean, it seems a little bit schizophrenic to me to think about what started out as a case management program becoming a platform for corporate legal.
Yeah, so I ought to show you the platform, but when we say we're Salesforce for lawyers, we really take that seriously. Salesforce would never sort of say to themselves, "Oh, we can't handle a GC's office, or we can't handle a sales team, or we can't handle a law office." That their ambitions are, "Hey, our software is configurable enough to handle a wide variety of use cases." And Filevine is indeed very configurable. So you are right, though, that it's challenging. The high degree of customizability requires either some really intrepid and skillful customers who are willing to set up the system on their own, or it requires an implementation partner, or it requires the customer to pay us to help them set it up. They don't have to pay us, right? They can do it on their own, but it is a bit of a challenge. We find that our best customers are folks that were maybe into Legos as a kid and kind of enjoy the idea of kind of putting these pieces together and building a system. So yeah, Filevine is just a very configurable platform upon which you can do quite a bit. And that was a key insight that Jim had. I think the general thing that was happening is, as we were selling, even within the personal injury community, I would come to them and I would say, hey, well, in Arizona, the law works like this, and there's these edge cases, and they really care about these things in their contact cards. And then I would say, oh my goodness, this firm in Philadelphia, they really care about this other thing. And, the way they calculate a settlement is quite different. And as I would come to him with these things, he eventually, I think, had this insight that the ultimate solution here is something that is more of a platform upon which a lot of different configurations can be built. And so it can speak to a wide variety of industries.
Yeah. Have you faced challenges in the marketing side in conveying that message? I mean, I'm looking at your website, which says we are the operating core for legal. And as you just, made the analogy to Salesforce for legal. Honestly, I hear that a lot from a lot of companies, right? And I mean, you mentioned Clio before. I think they talk about themselves as the operating system for law or something like that. I mean, a lot of the legal tech companies that are in your space are using a lot of the same language to define how they think of themselves or where they want to get to anyway. And I feel like there's increasing market confusion about to what extent these claims or the marketing talk around what a company does reflects what it really does. And so how do you deal with the differentiation really in the market and how defining your place and where you fit into this market?
Yeah. So I'm not going to tell you that it's unchallenging. I think it is unchallenging, right? It would be hard for us. It would be much easier if we simply said, hey, we're going to be really good at claims management for, attorneys on the West Coast. We could really build a product that is absolutely perfect for them. But the reality is, Bob, that doesn't actually do the trick. And I'm going to say something that is maybe something other guests won't tell you. The legal tech community, the legal community actually doesn't want that. And here's why. A system that is that narrowly focused simply doesn't have the addressable market to attract not just the funding, set that aside. Developers have choices about what kind of company they want to work for. And the best developers in the world want to work on big problems that affect a lot of people. And so it would be great if we could create really kind of highly focused point solutions to tackle, really narrowly defined problems. I think you'd have a really hard time kind of seeing these businesses grow and mature and scale and be able to do the things that we expect of modern software and to evolve and become kind of what we would expect nowadays, because you just couldn't attract the talent to that kind of opportunity. So, I mean, that's maybe not the answer you were looking for, but I think there's some truth to that.
That's really interesting. And I mean, I guess the flip side of that also is we hear all the time from customers or legal professionals, as they are the customers we're talking about here, about this issue of platform fatigue and increasingly seeming to want a consolidated or an all-in-one or whatever you want to call it platform, just so that they are not constantly having to figure out which application does what it is I need to get done right now and flipping around them all day long, which is, can drive all lawyers crazy, and those who are not all that tech savvy really even crazier. So.
Oh, I think you're onto something. So, I mean, look, our ambitions are big. I think that sentiment is correct, and I intend to build that system. If I, may be so bold, I think you need to be able to do all the big things a lawyer does. The three main ones I mentioned, case management, document management, time and billing. I think the first system that can really do all three of those well will have a market leadership role that will really be unmatched, and so many people will gravitate towards that system. So that is indeed our plan. That's where we intend to take things.
Yeah. Well, you've got $108 million in your pocket to do it. So what are you going to do with this money?
Yeah, so great question. So you'll see development along all three of those core initiatives, case management, document management, and time and billing. You'll see quite a bit of development on the Outlaw side. We think Outlaw has sort of an opinionated take on how CLM should work. Like I say, it's this sort of non-word-centric opinion, and we feel that it can do some things that a lot of others are going to struggle to do because of it. So you will see that platform grow into a mature and I think very hard to reckon with CLM product within the market. And I'll tell you this, it's the only one. It is the only contract lifecycle management product that will be fully integrated into a case management system. And let me just tell you what that means. If you're at a GC's office and you've got data about all the various vendors and matters that you're handling, whether it's internal matters, external matters, all that data has to sit somewhere. And if it's sitting in a GC's office, where you also need it is in your contract lifecycle management platform. But most CLMs aren't really built for that. Most CLMs are not also databases. And we've built a system where quite literally you can generate the contract, but if you make a change in that contract, so, if you say, okay, instead of a 4-year term, we're going to do a 3-year term, and you type that into that document, Outlaw is actually going to say to Filevine, oh, the term changed. It's not a 4-year contract, it's a 3-year contract. That fidelity between the document and the system of record, I don't think has existed yet in law. And so law firms need that, in-house lawyers need that, and I think that positions us in a really unique way to attack this market.
Yeah. Are you going after the mid-enterprise market, the larger enterprise market? Where are you going here?
I think mid's fair. Yeah. I think mid's fair, yeah.
So one of the, what was mentioned in the press release also was trying to expand more into that market. So does that suggest that you're also going to be putting more money into sales and marketing at this point?
For sure. Yes. We have a pretty significant size sales team. Sorry if they've reached out to you. They can be fairly persistent, but yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm too small potatoes. They haven't called me.
No, I don't know about that. But so that sales team is growing now and will continue to grow. Absolutely. And there will, there's a sales team. Up till now, we haven't really had a sales team that's specific to Outlaw and Lead Docket for that matter. We'll be growing out the sales teams to make specific groupings for both those products.
Yeah. What was the thinking behind doing a Series D? I mean, I know that some companies will see, a Series C as often being an endpoint for them, and then looking at some other possible exit or something else at that point. Others will go on to a Series D and even beyond in some cases. But where do you see this investment, I guess, from a sort of strategic growth standpoint for the company?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, it kind of comes back to your original one, like, well, hey, aren't you tackling too much? And my answer is we are indeed tackling a lot. The ambition is pretty big. The coverage that we want to take on is significant. And so it really it requires a more significant investment. If we were to stop now, we'd be a different kind of software, and we would have to more narrowly define our market. To do the kinds of things we want to do is going to take more capital. I think legal tech is really calling out for leadership and a company that can say, okay, we're going to be a public company in the case management space. There hasn't been one. Clio may well do it. That's a great company. Mm-hmm. But, I tend to think, and Jack may well disagree. I actually haven't met Jack, but I hear great things about him. But I think it's probably true that we have more large firms than Clio on average. I think that's probably the case. And so up market, I think that there's room for a company like ours to be sort of the de facto standard and a public company. And that's eventually where we'd like to go. We're not doing that anytime soon. I'm not, running afoul of SEC rules. We've got more than enough time to make that happen. But that is the long-term vision. We think the market in legal is big enough if you can tackle enough that it justifies a public business.
Yeah. What was the impact of the last couple of years on your business? We hear so much about the pandemic, the silver lining of the pandemic having been an accelerant of adoption and use of technology, and particularly cloud technology. So what was the impact on Filevine?
Oh, there's no doubt that's true. That's absolutely true. So, and in fact, I'll tell you your question about, hey, why do a Series D? So our Series C was actually kind of interesting. It was a bit stealth. So we raised a Series B, $20 million round with a Silicon Valley firm called Meritech, a great firm. And that round, that happened kind of pre-COVID. And as COVID was going on, sometime around, I'm going to say August, maybe even late July of 2020, Filevine was, in all honesty, just really doing well. Our sales were hitting records. And Meritech reached out and said, hey, we'd like to do another round right now. We're very pleased with where the business is going. And instead of going to market and doing kind of a full search, we'd be honored if you'd do another round with us. And they were good enough to offer the round on very attractive terms compared to the previous. So we said yes. So there wasn't a lot of advertising because it came together very quickly. So you probably didn't hear about our C, right? Because it just kind of happened very fast. And so
I was looking back because I didn't remember hearing about it. So
yeah, that's what happened.
And so that was driven in part by the pandemic, and then I mean the press release that you guys put out about the news today said that you achieved 198% growth in annual recurring revenue over the last 2 years, maintaining a customer net retention rate of over 130%. In 2021 alone, you've signed 708 new customers. And since acquiring Outlaw, you've grown its ARR by 400%. So it's been a good year.
It's been a good year. It is a great time to be in legal tech. There's just, and you know this, Bob, the industry is really feeling the strain of too much work. And, lawyers, I think for the first time are kind of turning down good work that they might have taken otherwise in prior years. And boy, that's a great place for a technology company to be.
Right.
When you've got overworked knowledge workers who are as important to our democratic system as lawyers, the thing I say around the company is the wheels of justice must turn. It's not like you can't answer a subpoena or a complaint or a sexual harassment issue. These things must be dealt with, and it's really straining lawyers, and they're turning to technology to solve those problems.
Yeah. And what about these latest investors? What can you tell me about them? And
Stepstone is a great group, previously known as Green Springs. Green Springs has been an LP in a lot of major funds, and just a fantastic group of investors. Really excited to have Peter on from Golub, and just a fantastic group. And of course, all of our previous, I think all but one of our previous investors doubled down. So Meritech also invested again. Signal Peak Ventures also invested again. And so it's been good to kind of, see continued affirmation from the current investor set.
You've talked a lot about your immediate plans for building out your market. Anything else on the horizon for Filevine that we haven't talked about in terms of where you're looking to go?
I don't have any companies that I'm looking to acquire right now. There's nobody specifically on my radar.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah, nobody right now. We do have some really interesting products that we'll be coming out with in the course of the next 90 days to 180 days that I'm really proud of. Some of the most exciting things we've ever built. So you'll see some awesome announcements, some really exciting announcements from us.
Sounds good. Your story about going to that first AAJ convention, I had chuckled at it only because I remembered talk about Jack Newton. He always talks about the first time he and his co-founder exhibited. They literally went and bought a monitor for the exhibit hall, and then at the end of the day went and returned it. And just this year at ABA Tech Show, I was talking to one of the exhibitors there who did exactly the same thing, who had heard that story, and low budget legal tech startup went out and basically bought a computer to exhibit and then was going to return it at the end of the day. So just wondering, for you as somebody who went from practicing law to becoming a founder and a CEO and building up a company over 7-8 years now, what have you learned? What advice would you have for other founders or other lawyers who want to become entrepreneurs even?
Yeah, I love the question. Real quickly, I'll just say, boy, I remember cold calling lawyers to buy Filevine, and I was still practicing at the time, and I'll never forget lawyers saying to me like, well, you don't know what our life is like, and you don't know what you don't know what it's like to be at a law office, and I mean that's a struggle. And so any entrepreneur who is picked up the phone and cold called people to try and sell their wares, like they have all my respect in the world, because I remember doing that, and hundreds of times a day. It's really challenging. So the advice I would give is that if you can make the product a little bit better every week, you'll be surprised at how far you go. And the other thing I'll say, and this is some hard-won advice that I think I've only realized recently, the development process itself, I really believe in an highly iterative development process. So instead of building every single thing you think a customer might want, build the smallest thing that you think they might find useful, give it to them. They'll be quite eager to tell you how it falls short in so many areas. But that feedback is just absolutely valuable. And it's my belief that a lot of entrepreneurs let perfection be the enemy of the good. And instead of getting a product out there that, man, it is not ready for prime time, but if somebody will use it and tell you what's wrong with it, actually use it for real work in their day, that is just gold. And if you can go and fix a couple things that they said were wrong and give it back to them and see if they'll use it some more and do that over and over again, eventually, you'll have a product that people really rely on. And we still do that to this day. We really rely on what we call our insiders, those people who get features first. And I feel bad for them sometimes because they have the buggiest version of Filevine because they get all the new stuff. But man, they're great at telling us where we've gone wrong. And so our view is to get the smallest iteration out as fast as possible and let them test it.
So start small and keep chipping away at it, keep building on it, and pretty soon you're going to have a real product there.
Well, and you're doing the same thing with your website. So congratulations on that, by the way.
Yeah, I'm learning. I'm learning what it's like to have a startup. Need to get you guys in there. We don't have you guys listed in our directory yet.
I would love it. I'll be honest. Yeah. I did check it out and noticed we weren't there. So
yeah, well, you have to add yourself. So talk to your marketing people. You must.
Fair enough.
Yeah, you've got to add. I assume you've got some marketing people on staff now at this point. So good.
That's I'll have a talk with them.
Good. Well, Ryan, it's really great to see you, and I really appreciate your time. As I say, especially on this particularly busy day for you. Thanks so much for talking.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. Thank you so much, Bob. Thanks for all you do for the legal tech community.
Yeah, well, you too. Congratulations. I've been speaking today with Ryan Anderson, the co-founder and CEO of legal tech company Filevine. A huge thanks to him for taking the time out of what was a very busy day, the day he announced the Series D financing, to join me today. What are your thoughts on today's show? Share them by tweeting us at LawNext Podcast. LawNext is produced, engineered, and edited by Populous Radio. I am your host, Bob Ambrogi. I hope you'll join us again next time for another episode of LawNext.